Tonight is something that has really shaped my heart and my habits this past year, and it's the lifestyle of Christ. I love thinking that Jesus had a certain lifestyle. And I know in one sense, duh. In another sense, it's like this new concept to me, and it's so exciting to think, God, how can I take the lifestyle that you lived 2,000 years ago and apply that same lifestyle for here and now? The idea is pretty simple. Jesus doesn't offer us just a way to life. Tonight we're talking about Jesus offers us a way of life. We really called this workshop the Apprentice workshop for the main reason of back in the day when Jesus, remember his disciples, or maybe we can even use the word apprentice, Jesus was their rabbi, Jesus was their teacher. But a lot of us, it's really funny because you look at the American church context, when we think, okay, I want to become a Christian, I want to learn more, we think of this setting. Kind of ironic, I know, I'm about to bad talk this setting that we're in right now. Like a classroom setting, writing notes down. I do think there is absolutely a time and a place. Thank you for being here. But there's also something much more, and hopefully what we're going to talk about tonight is a launching pad to help. But the followers of Jesus, the disciples, they went wherever Jesus went. They lived where Jesus lived. Why? Because what Jesus had to offer was much more than just 3 points in a poem. What Jesus had to offer was walk with me in the daily life and see how I interact with others. See how I approach the Samaritan woman, right? See how I confront the Pharisees. See how I am passionate about worship in the synagogue. All of these things, there's so many things that you can't just hear, you have to see. And so that's why what's been very troubling for our context is we have successfully separated belief from behavior. Because we're so terrified that we think it's our behavior that saves us. So we just don't follow the right behavior at all and just say, oh, I just believe. But if you truly believe, you'll know your beliefs by your behaviors, right? And that's where to look at tonight, because here's the problem we have. Mark Sayers, so you're about to receive a book at the end of tonight called The Disappearing Church by Mark Sayers. I love the book. It was my favorite book I read last year. I hope you guys get some value out of it. By the way, I know we only assign like 3 chapters. You can read the whole thing. For the nerds in the room, you can totally read the whole thing, okay? But in this book, you're going to love it. But I actually heard him talk on a podcast recently, and he said, okay, can we all agree? We need revival. We would love renewal in our city. We would love to see waves upon waves of people not only just believing in Jesus, but following Jesus. The whole point of this workshop. And the way he described it, and it was really helpful to me, he said what we need is both fire and form. So fire is what I talked about last session. The fire of God, just grace. Like there's nothing we can do to, we can't earn it. It's just like we're in a worship service and our eyes are open to the beauty of God and we're just on our knees praising God, right? We need that. You look through history of revivals. That's what happens. Jonathan Edwards would go up and preach, and all of a sudden people were like holding on to the pillars, wailing, wanting to come forward and receive Jesus. We have other revivals that had kind of a different flair to it. What you have is, you guys probably never heard of him, maybe, I don't want to assume, Saint Benedict. You guys ever heard of him? It was actually, I'm going to try to be really quick here because we have a lot to go through. But Saint Benedict, he actually brought revival in a different way. He brought revival because he wrote this I don't know if it was a book, it was called The Order of Life, Saint Benedict's Order. And so what he did, it was right after the Roman Empire fell, which is like maybe American empires, it will fall sometime, right? And so it was in the midst of chaos, and we know why did Rome fall? Because they were pursuing freedom, there was no longer rules, there was no boundaries. Does this sound familiar? And so they were just doing whatever they want, whenever they want, however they wanted to. And Saint Benedict, in a calm way, said, okay, this is what we need to do. We need to go back to an orderly life. We need to go back to doing these sets of practices. And so actually, St. Benedict was used by God, not by this crazy worship service, not by just all of a sudden hearing about the grace of Jesus, which is absolutely foundational, don't hear me wrong. The grace is actually what infuses our practices, but it was simply this is a disciplined structure of how to follow Jesus, and it brought revival. Something that I find interesting, I think our culture today needs both. Mark Sayers makes that point as well. We need fire, we need those services, we need sermons, but we also need form. We have our college students scattered throughout here tonight. what's really difficult, of course, not you guys, all the other ones, right? Is like so many college students are like, I just want to follow Jesus. And I'm like, that's so great. But they're like, but I'm so depressed. I'm like, well, you don't wake up till 2 p.m. Like, you don't ever make your bed. You haven't brushed your teeth in 2 weeks. You know, like there's these little things you can do that'll actually get your life together, you know? I shouldn't jump into this. There's this guy, Jordan Peterson. You ever heard of him before? He's this new psychologist and all this stuff. Young men, those ones nodding their heads right now, they are flocking to Jordan Peterson. Why? He came up with 12 rules of life or something like that. It's like a top New York Times bestseller. One of them is make your bed. Guys, it is bringing a revival to these people because they're like, I get to make my bed? I don't know what y'all parents were doing to us. But like, they're like, this guy's brilliant. It's like, my mom told me that right away, right? But we are primed in a culture today. And I want to bring encouragement to you because I talk to so many people who want to follow Jesus and they love him and they hear the service and they came down to the altar call, but they're so depressed because they feel like nothing's changed. And my answer is because your behaviors haven't changed. It is obviously God who does these things, but there are steps that you have to take in order for God to bring his power. And I'm not saying making your bed is what brings power, although your mom might say it is, right? But the point is that you actually have these rules. You have these formations, okay? So here's the thesis for tonight. Your journey of faith will be that of frustration if you're not intentional with spiritual formation. Spiritual formation is a concept. I probably should have studied this before we started tonight. I don't know who coined the phrase. People like Dallas Willard are at the forefront. You already read his book, The Great Omission. Several people, a lot of the authors I'm showing you, they're very passionate about spiritual formation. John Ortberg is a huge proponent of it. What is spiritual formation? We're going to look at that tonight, but it's essentially these practices of Jesus. Now, if you don't know this language, back in the day, how many of you guys heard it as spiritual disciplines? Right? You ever heard of spiritual disciplines? I have realized that spiritual disciplines, great, but when I hear that, I want to sleep. Okay? So I don't know why, because when I think of spiritual disciplines, I think of high school when I try to wake up every day at 4:30. And to be honest, I did that for a while. And to be honest, God brought fire. There was incredible things that happened in my life because I put that discipline. But I have noticed in ministering to others, when I say spiritual disciplines, their eyes go half glazed. But when I say the practices of Jesus, there's something different there. And maybe you think I'm dumb, but there's something to me. I think even just changing the phrase kind of brings this renewal, this taste for more. I love practice because it's not the real game either. It's like this idea of like, I'm just practicing. I can mess up today. That's okay. I'll just practice again tomorrow. Like there's something about that. I think us in our culture today, we're kind of terrified of the word discipline. But the point is, discipline is a joy. The practices are a joy. These practices, and I'm about to introduce what those are, but these practices are how we truly partake in God's power and God's presence. And we can say we want God's power in our life. We can say we want God's presence, but if we are not partaking, that's an act on our part, partaking in the practices of Jesus, I would argue every day, then there will always be a disconnect. There will always be dysfunction, and we'll be greatly discouraged. So let's look at Matthew 22. Starting in verse 36, they say, "Teacher, which command in the law is the greatest?" He said to him, you guys probably know this really well, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind," which has been really the heartbeat of what we're doing here. And this is the greatest and most important command. The second is like it, love your neighbor as yourself. Right? So that's why you have a lot of churches, they say, what is our vision statement? What is it? Love God and love others. But what does that look like practically for us? How do we actually love God? Because what I want to do as a pastor, what we want to do as pastors is we want to say, okay, love God, but now it's our duty as shepherds to say, and here's ways to love God. Here's practices that you can start instilling in your life. And guess what? Here's the trick, guys. So many of these practices, you don't love God until you do them. A lot of us think, once I love God, I'll do them. But it actually takes a lot of these practices to really kind of sweeten the taste and love for God, if that makes sense. So what does this look like for us? But how do you love God? We think, how do you spend your time? You need to be intentional with your God time and gather time. What is God time? God time is things like prayer. This is your personal time with the Lord. Fasting. How many of you guys in that practicing the way of Jesus, you were super bummed when you found out the upstream practice, that something that you really needed for your life was fasting? That was me. I'm like, anything else but fasting. Why do I have to fast? This sounds miserable. You have Bible reading, Sabbath, silence and solitude, meditation. This is God time. I promise you, your love for God will be fleeting if you're not intentionally putting these practices into place. It doesn't matter how much you love Him, how much, oh, but I love God. Okay, what are the practices you're putting in place? What does your God time look like? And again, a lot of people say, well, I don't want to make this rigid. I just want this to be organic. My question is, how is that working for you? It's not. And so that's something that I would argue every day of the week. Gather time.
What's organic?
Organic just means natural, like it's not planned. It's just when it happens, it happens. And so to me, I think it needs to be a little more scheduled than we like to admit. And I do think it is a pushback from religious people who are pharisaical, and if you don't do this, you're going to hell. And so I think that is wrong, but I think we're so scared of becoming those people that we've swung the other way entirely and say, just do it whenever you want. Hopefully it happens. That's a good question. So gather time is Sunday mornings. This is the gathering. And again, how popular is it to dismiss the importance of Sunday morning gatherings? Just me I'm at church when I'm fishing in Alaska. It's pretty close to it though, I'm not gonna lie. But should have said anywhere else but Alaska, right? No, like there is something to it. What happens in gather time? Well, you worship as a collective body. You are declaring together as a body of Christ the goodness of God. By the way, notice how this is loving God, not loving you. When we gather, we're not here to love ourselves, okay? Of course, God doesn't call us to hate ourselves, but supremely, the greatest way to love ourselves is to first and foremost love God. It's to serve others. It's a great opportunity on Sundays. Even there is no small task. Stuff that has to happen, setting up, tearing down, serving the children, all those things. Giving is a worship act. It is how we love God. It's how we say, God, I trust you. And I'm going to put it like for me and my wife, every 2 weeks, it's coming out of the account. No questions asked. We don't say, should we give this week? That's already done. Now we're trying to figure out what to do with the rest of our money. Communion, this is something that's important. Okay, so what is loving others? 2 different ways that we love others, group time and go time. What is group time? This is why all of our churches, we push growth groups, small groups, right? What should happen here is we meet in the middle of the week at somebody's house, and it's fellowship. It's spending time actually eating together and just checking on how people are doing. This is Bible study. This is where it's more interactive, where we ask questions and wrestle with things. It's confession. It's saying, hey, I'm not doing well. Hey, I haven't done this well. I need your help. It's conflict resolution. Anytime people are gathered together for any amount of time, Christ will be there, but so will conflict, right? There's always, but this is how we work through those things. And then go time. This is sharing the gospel. This is hospitality. Disciple making, it's going. It's meeting people where they're at. And this will be a big emphasis for the last session, this next session, in understanding our culture and how do we reach them. But the question we have to ask ourselves is, how do we do all this? How do we implement God, gather, group, and go time into our daily life? It takes a lot of intentionality, but I want to encourage us is what's very helpful is what works for me doesn't necessarily work for you. And I want to be careful with how I describe that, but I'll unpack this as we go. But it takes a lot of intentionality. And again, it's really popular for us to say, let's not be intentional. If it happens, it happens. No, I think my wife, she wants me to talk to her every day, and I make sure that happens, right? Although it is organic, babe, don't worry. But you know what I'm saying? I'm in trouble here. So just even right off the bat, it's not on the notes anywhere, but I would start to think through, in fact, it's going to be one of your discussion questions tonight. What are some things you need to do every year? What are some practices? So like me and Dad, we're going to Alaska once a year. This is a good father-son time. The Lord wants us to do it, okay? All right, so that's a great yearly practice. Silence and solitude, right? Getting out in nature. These are all practices of Jesus. Monthly practices. What are some things you need to do once a month that helps you love God and love other people? Weekly practices. So for me, every Thursday night to Friday night, I fast. And actually implementing also every Monday. But let's just, for the sake of, let's say weekly, just Fridays. But Saturdays, I'm Sabbathing once a week. You know what that means? I eat whatever I want, whenever I want, right? Not however I want to. Jordan makes me use a fork. But weekly practices, what are some weekly practices for you? These are things, like we want you to love Jesus more and to love others more. And these weekly practices, it's on the calendar, will help you dramatically. Daily practices. So some daily practices are like reading your Bible every day, praying every day. But I want us to see that there's something so much more. I hate to say there's so much more, but usually the answer in Sunday school is, what do we do? Well, we need to read more. We need to pray more. We need to go to church more. Like we think like that's it. But actually in exploring these practices, there's more to it. Jesus did more than just those three things. And so we need to see what that is. And then, if you're really up to it, there's hourly practices. Some of you saw there's fixed hour of prayer, right? It's okay. In certain hours of the day, I'm moving everything aside, and I'm going on my knees and praying. So I actually want to introduce you to this book. I didn't make you read it, but I should have, right? So this is called The Common Rule by Justin Whitmore Early. Anyways, he's really nice. I hit him up on Instagram and he replied. Okay, but anyways, this book, it's called The Common Rule, and he set forth a set of daily and weekly practices that he uses, and he lays out what it looks like, how to implement it in your life. And so for him, he calls it the Common Rule, just like kind of like the common order that St. Benedict created. He's saying I kind of created something like that for our generation. A couple of the things where one practice of his is every day he doesn't touch his phone for the first 2 hours of the day. Now, Jesus didn't have a phone, but I'm pretty sure he would have done something like that if he was here, right? So little stuff like that will dramatically change your life. When you wake up, are you going to make it your daily practice now? Instead of checking Instagram or Facebook, you're checking God's Word, right? Another book I want to recommend, if you enjoyed Dallas Willard's writing, he has a book called The Spirit of the Disciplines. So he uses the word disciplines, but he just goes through a lot of these practices and explains what it means and how to do it. So it's really helpful. I loved it. Caleb, you really enjoyed it too, right? Another book that a lot of people praise as a great thing about it is Celebration of Discipline by Richard Foster. It's the same thing. It's a list of disciplines and how to do them, why we do them, just exploring them deeply. What's actually encouraging to me in a weird way, there is no formal list of all the disciplines because there's just, we find new ones almost every day. So I'm intentional of not creating this list for us to be like, make sure you do all of those because we don't actually know all the different lists. Here's what I want us to see. I hope this is the bread and butter for tonight. We can personalize these practices according to our sin, season, and stage of life. So these practices are not cookie cutter, and that's why I think this will be liberating for some of you, and hopefully in your Enneagram in the Way of Jesus, you kind of saw that. You saw a glimpse how some things work for you that maybe don't necessarily work for other people. And that's actually what's always been discouraging in my life. I'm a 7, but I looked and analyzed my whole life. I've always had 3s as mentors. And so 3s are the high achievers, which I have a lot of 3 in me, but I am mainly 7. And so 3s love the 1-year Bible reading plan because they're like, checklist, done. I just read the whole Bible every year, check me out. And so I would constantly make myself read the Bible, the whole Bible every year, right? But it grew stale for me. It wasn't what I needed. But I was just like, but all my mentors said I have to do this. But guess what? It's because it's what worked for them, right? So for you, you have a little wiggle room. Now, this doesn't mean, well, I just don't like the Bible, so, I'm a 6, like that just stresses me out too much. No, that's not, so I want to make sure this isn't ever an excuse for do things. So let's look at our sin. This is why I'm really passionate about the Enneagram, because we need to understand our particular temptations that draw us away from God. How you are drawn away from God is different than how I am drawn away from God. So it's important for us to put in practices so that we don't get drawn away from God. Me being a 7, the party animal, right? I love being distracted. I have to put in I don't touch my phone the first 2 hours of every single day. Because if I jump there, I'll look up and it's noon, right? So it's so funny. In this book, I asked Jordan how she liked it. She goes, I just learned I'm a terrible person. Anybody else feel that way? It's like, I just learned how bad I am. Yes. Now, we'll have the altar call forward. Jesus is good in your place. Isn't that the essence of Christianity? You're a mess, but Jesus is perfect, right? So hopefully, though, that helped us realize how we can lean away from God and it'll help us. So I want us to look at what are the different types of Enneagram numbers and how you lean in one direction or another. So again, these practices will help you be self-aware. These Enneagram numbers will help you be self-aware of your thoughts and habits that pull you away from loving God and loving others. So some of you are in the gut triad, or it's called the instinctive triad. You operate off your instincts. These are types 8, 9, and 1. Raise your hand if you're an 8, 9, or 1. Wow. I better spend a lot of time on this one. This is most of y'all. Y'all are angry people, okay? Because you struggle with different forms of anger. And this really bothered my wife because she is not an angry person, but there is a right and a wrong. And if you do wrong, she ain't happy, right? But not angry. She's too cute for that. But not happy. You know what I'm saying? So all of us, we struggle with anger, but it manifests itself in different ways. 8s, you are angry. Like you're just like, right? We're all terrified of you when you have your episode. Okay? 9s, no one else knows you're angry but you. But you are angry, but you come up with all your comebacks when you're at home. I could have totally told them this. Mom, you didn't though, so it doesn't really count. But here's what we have to realize though, is with our struggle and anger, we have to put forth these practices to instill peace in our life, to instill love, and to be patient. So we think this lie, it's in that book, Enneagram, The Way of Jesus. If I let my guard down, I'll be annihilated. We think we have to always have our guard up if you are in the gut triad. But that makes it really hard to love God and love others. Are you in the gut triad? You have to start thinking through, and hopefully, again, this book gave you a lot of upstream, downstream. So upstream is practices that are difficult, but you need them. Downstream are practices that are easy, and you need them just to keep going. Like this will help encourage you. Now, others of us are in the heart triad or the feeling triad. This is types 2, 3, and 4. Raise your hand if you are in this triad. Fantastic. Okay, so here you struggle with different forms of shame. You're constantly wondering how people are perceiving you, right? But when you do that, you are actually not able to love other people because you are more consumed in your thoughts about what are they thinking about me than you are spending time helping to love and serve them. So you have to put forth these practices. These practices can be all sorts of things. One practice is the practice of listening. A 2, 3, and 4 struggles because they want to impress you. But what if you leave a conversation and you are actually not the most impressive person in that conversation? Jesus did this all the time. He could have weird flexed. He could have been a humble brag. Instead, he made that person feel good about themselves. So your practice, maybe for some of you daily, you know what? I could have totally one-upped him just now because I've done something way cooler than he just said he's done. But I'm going to say you are incredible and walk away, right? Well, don't walk away. That's awkward, right? But like some of these practices, again, so a lot of this is between you and God. So you have to shame. Okay, God, I'm bringing forth. I'm insecure. God, I don't feel loved. Putting forth maybe a practice for you is to read scriptures, memorize passages about God's love for you, your identity in Christ. You are a new creation. The old is gone. The new has come. You need to meditate on those things. And in loving others, you need to do several practices. It makes it really hard to love God and love others if you're constantly thinking, if I stop pushing my image, then I'll be found worthless. So we have to put forth that practice. The head triad. Who's in the thinking head triad? Shout out to us. We are the few but the proud, okay? That's me. 5, 6, and 7. We struggle with different forms of fear. So she's constantly thinking of the worst situations that will happen at like events or the music, all that. I'm thinking we're all going to die of cancer and like this plague that's coming from Norway, right? Like I'm Googling like IMDb, that's an internet movie database. I'm Googling WebMD, right? Like stressing out, right? So for us, we struggle with different forms of fear. So for me, I have to put forth practices that will help me realize, okay, This fear is wrong. The number one command in the Bible said more than anything is what? Do not fear, for I am with you. So I have to put forth these practices because here's the lie that we believe. I will sink if I don't keep swimming. I just have to keep doing more, and if I'm not the one carrying the ship, this whole thing is going to go to pieces. That's not true. So for me, the biggest things that help me in my practices are fasting, not enjoying things, right? Saying, God, you alone are good enough, but Sabbath, resting, not working. Because I believe this lie, I'm fearful that if I stop working, everything will collapse. Maybe you don't believe that lie. Maybe it's another lie you believe. You have to put forth these different practices. So if you're a type 1, you struggle with anger and its many forms, you are called the good person. A downstream for you would be meditating and making things better, fixing things. My wife, she goes in the bathroom and just puts everything in the perfect place. Like that's something that just helps her in her life. Stresses me out. But upstream, I'm just kidding, I love it. I just don't want to do it. Upstream, so in other words, things that are difficult to do, according to a lot of the books that you read, is journaling, confession, and assurance. If you're a type 2 here in this room, you're a loving person, but you need to put off pride. Pride is your sin that you struggle with. And a downstream, something that's easy for you to do and you need to do often, is hospitality. You need to offer a lending hand and help people, but upstream, something that's hard for you to do is centering prayer. If you are a 3, you're an effective person, but you need to put off the sin of self-promotion. So you need to figure out these different practices. A downstream for you is Bible reading plan, but an upstream for you is confession of sin, admitting that you aren't as perfect as everyone thinks you are. Type 4 is the original person. There's nobody like you. That's what you think. You need to put off envy, though. You have shame in your roots, and what you need to do is a downstream. What's good for you is silence and solitude. You're an original person. You want to be by yourself. That is great. But an upstream that you need to do constantly is thanksgiving. Thanking God for the way God created you. Type 5, you're the wise person, but you need to put off greed. And a downstream for you is books about practicing the way. These are great things you want to learn. You want to take as much information as possible. But an upstream for you, it's really hard, is to share and serve others. Because you're smarter than everybody else. You don't want to help them. They're dumb, right? Type 6, you're the loyal person. What you need to put off, we see that clearly in Matthew chapter 6, you need to put off anxiety. How do you do this? Some things, downstream is to sing, praise God, blare the music, right, in the car. And upstream for you, though, is scripture memory. You need to remember and quote these scriptures that'll bring you assurance to your soul. If you're a joyful person like me, type 7, we need to put off gluttony. So downstream for me is celebration and community. It's Sabbath on Friday nights, bringing friends over, celebrating, loving on people. But an upstream that's really, really difficult for me, but I'm putting it as a daily and weekly practice, is fasting is my weekly practice, and solitude is a daily practice for me. It's so hard, but I promise you, I love Jesus so much more when I do those things. If you are a type 8, you're a powerful person. Watch out, right? But you need to put off lust in its many forms. And so downstream for you is justice. You're the ones picketing all those rallies. You're the ones that kind of love watching the news and saying this world is going in a handbasket, but I'm going to fix it. However, your upstream for you is to be vulnerable, is to have accountability, to admit that you're weak, that's the last thing you want to do. If you're a type 9, that means you're a peaceful person. You need to put off relational sloth. You need to put off sloth altogether. Sometimes it's towards other people, or oftentimes it's towards yourself. So downstream, helpful practices are nature walks and peacemaking, helping bring people together. But an upstream for you, because of your laziness, is actually Bible reading, actually keeping a consistent plan and being faithful to it. Does this make sense? So I want us to see not all the answers are just read your Bible and go to church, which you need to do those things. And the worst thing we can do is make the Enneagram an excuse. Oh, that's just not my type. Oh, I don't read the Bible. I'm a 7. I'm too distracting. No. Okay, you got to read your Bible. But maybe, for me, I have to put on Braveheart music sometimes while I'm reading the Bible to get me in the mood. Okay, like you got to realize what are different ways that I'm wired and created. It's incredible, guys. I try to read the Bible in a Scottish accent. It's freedom, right? Okay, so our season of life. Our particular set of life circumstances. So again, we're talking about how do we personalize our practices? Give yourself some grace. God has you in different seasons. Some of you, you are a mother of 3 kids, all under 4. right? It's my wife and me. Pray for us. But motherhood. So guess what? There's some things that just, in this season, it's not going to work. You got kids running around everywhere. But there's other seasons of life where you're empty nester. So now we have to realize, okay, what used to work for me and when I was a father with kids in the house, now I have to change my rhythms because the house is empty. Now I have more time. Maybe God is inviting me to more silence and solitude because I can finally have it. How is it, guys? Is it nice? Hey, right? You see what I'm saying? Here's another thing. Maybe you're in a season of life where you've just gone through trauma. You just need to be ministered to and loved. And maybe you're in a season where you were just resting in God's presence. You're actually not doing as much activity as you once did before, but God is a gracious God, and He wants to love on you. He wants to heal your wounds, and He wants you in community. We're all in different seasons. Sometimes you're on an on fire season, where you just want to read everything, pray for everyone, save the whole world. Other times you're in a dry season, where everything is just miserable. So for me, sometimes, I actually kind of felt a dry season recently, and I've been on this path of reading 2 books a week, like these types of books. But I gave myself some grace and say, okay, God, I feel like you're calling me to stop doing that and just stay in one paragraph of the Bible for that whole hour. It's hard. But I think it's what God's calling me to do, and it has been helping me. So we have to see that. The other thing is our stage. Remember the 4 stages in passionately pursuing? It's our particular stage of growth in Christ. You guys probably heard this old adage, but what got you here isn't necessarily what will get you there. And so for me, reading the Bible from cover to cover was so absolute. I think everyone, when you're first coming to Christ, that is foundational. You're able to see the whole story of God. You're able to get a real grasp on it. But if you're in year 20 of doing that, maybe it's okay to let go of that plan and allow God to get into a new season where you just start every day in just the Psalms and you pray through it, right? Because I don't have time. Saint Teresa of Avila, I talked about her in the stages. She talks about the mansions. She's the one who wrote about the mansions. She talked about how there's 4 different ways to water the soul, and each way gets easier. And her point was that when you first come to Christ, it actually is the hardest way. You have to really be active and read your Bible and do all these things. But if you find yourself in the latter half of life, you'll actually find that what Jesus wants you to do is just to commune with Him. It's actually not as much activity as it once required, but you're still with Him actually with more time, but it is with more ease. So you have to realize that. So I'm going to give you one more book recommendation. This one's incredible. Robert Mulholland, he wrote this book called Invitation to a Journey. It's literally, the tagline is a roadmap for spiritual formation. He actually lays forth, instead of using the Enneagram, he uses Myers-Briggs. And he lays forth, okay, if you are this type of person, INFJ or whatever, here's some things that you need to look out for. Here's some things that'll help you. This book was really helpful for me. In fact, this book also talks about the stages, the 4 stages that I had referenced. So I recommend this. It really helps us understand, okay, our particular stage, our particular season, our particular sin. How has God called us to apply these things? I want to give you 2 encouragements and we're done. The first one is trying to behave like Jesus leads to death, but training to become like Jesus leads to life. And I want us to understand there is a dramatic difference between the 2. The last thing I think Jesus wants from us is, okay, tomorrow we're going to run the marathon. The last thing Jesus wants you to do is tomorrow you're going to start your day with 4 hours of prayer. Now maybe circumstances came in your life, everything hit the fan, you need those 4 hours. I'm not discounting that possibility. At the same time, I want you to recognize Jesus offers grace. And Jesus, that's why we call it practicing. It's this slow, day by day, step by step, just communing, getting closer to Jesus. Because so many of us are discouraged because we hear a great sermon and the next day we try as hard as we can, we're met with opposition and we quit. What little practice? It's actually your first question in the discussion. What is the one next step you can take in these practices? What do you need to do? And allow God to be gracious, because here's the point of it. We're not trying to behave like Him. We're trying to become like Him. We're trying to actually genuinely love God and genuinely love other people. And that takes time, and that takes a lot of heart work that God is so willing to do in your life. I want you to see that there's so much grace, because tomorrow God knows you can't run the marathon. I want you to believe this over your life. Dwelling on God's love for me keeps discipline from drudgery. The biggest temptation, I think what the devil loves to do, is he wants you to hear these disciplines and think they're drudgery, think they're miserable, think they're painful, think they're boring, think they're not life-giving. And so I hope that hopefully this Enneagram in the Way of Jesus and all these talks actually remove all those excuses, that actually God wants to do something in your life and he's uniquely wired you to some of these practices you'll actually enjoy. But this is what we need. We need these disciplines, but we can't do them without God's love. The first and foremost, the reason we're doing these practices is because we just want to know God more. And here's why we desperately need to pray to God, because God is really the only one that can refresh and renew our heart to want Him more than anything else in this world. This is a journey towards loving Him. And so at the forefront, it's tempting for me. I actually pervert this and think, okay, I just need to become the best person, right? I need to be like Jesus, and I make it about a performance. No. The point is not to perform. The point is to love Him and be in community with Him. And so dwelling on God's love for me keeps discipline from drudgery. Are you thinking these disciplines are drudgery? They're painful? Spend some time dwelling on the love of God and recognize it's those practices that bring you even closer to His love.